I stood there amidst the sea of people in the grand ballroom of the most luxurious hotel in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I am Kevin Brown, 35 years old, an independent financial advisor living a simple life surrounded by numbers and investment plans. But today, I was not the office guy nursing a cold cup of coffee. Today was my younger sister Hannah Brown's wedding day, and I was trying to blend into this glamorous atmosphere. The ballroom was magnificently decorated with sparkling crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, casting a golden glow onto the gold-plated tables and chairs. The scent of fresh roses and premium wine filled the air, mingling with the soothing melody of violins played by the live orchestra in the corner of the room. More than 400 guests, business associates, local officials, and the groom's family partners were engaged in hushed conversations, their laughter and chatter echoing like a symphony of wealth and status. I felt out of place in the midst of it all, but for Hannah's sake, I forced a smile and gripped my wine glass tightly. I glanced at my watch, anxiously waiting. Hannah, my little sister, had always been the pride of our family. At 28 years old, she was beautiful, intelligent, and now about to begin a new chapter in life with Megan Mitchell, the man she believed was her destiny. I had watched her grow from a mischievous little girl on our family farm to a successful woman working in an advertising company. This wedding was her dream, and I had promised myself that I would do everything to make this day perfect for her. But then, amid the lively atmosphere, the main doors of the ballroom quietly opened. My parents, Wesley and Charlie Brown, walked in. They were dressed simply as always. My father in his old gray suit, my mother in a faded pale blue long dress with frayed hems. Their familiar weathered appearance spoke of honest farmers, with calloused hands from years of plowing the fields on our farm on the outskirts of Mount Pleasant. They had rented a car to drive up from the countryside despite my repeated offers to pick them up. "You're busy enough, son. We can manage on our own," my father had said over the phone, his voice warm but firm. I knew they didn't want to burden me, but seeing them standing there amid all this opulence, my heart tightened. The look of bewilderment was clear on their faces. My father, with his snow-white hair and deeply etched lines of hardship, scanned the room with wide eyes as if he had stepped into an alien world. My mother clutched his hand tightly, her lips pressed together, trying to stay composed. They quietly chose a secluded corner near the side door, standing close to the wall, trying not to disturb anyone. I was not far away, and the sight filled me with a bitter ache. My parents had sacrificed so much to raise us, sleepless nights worrying about the harvest, meager meals so they could save money for my sibling and me to study. Now, they stood there like strangers at their own daughter's wedding. I swallowed hard, trying to hold back the rising sorrow. I have to go greet them, I thought to myself, and began walking toward them. But there was no warm welcome. No caring glances from the crowd. Instead, a few people who noticed their presence began whispering and pointing. Curious and judgmental looks swept over them as if my parents were some exotic exhibit on display. I caught fragments of the murmurs. "Look over there, probably relatives of the bride from the countryside," a shrill female voice rang out. "Dressed like that and daring to come in here?" A sneer followed. My heart pounded, blood rushing to my face. I quickened my pace, ready to shout at them to shut up, but then everything happened too fast. I was about to reach them and say hello when the groom's parents, Charles and Donna Mitchell, approached first. They appeared as if out of nowhere, dressed in expensive outfits that glittered under the lights. Charles, a successful businessman with neatly combed hair and a fake smile, and Donna, his wife, in a striking red evening gown and a sparkling diamond necklace. They acted as though they had just coincidentally noticed my parents, stopping with a carefully staged expression of surprise. "Oh, hello. Are you the bride's parents?" Charles asked loudly, his voice echoing through the ballroom, loud enough to draw attention from those nearby. My father nodded politely, my mother smiled timidly. But then came a gasp of exaggerated shock from Donna. "Oh my God, look at how rustic you're dressed. I thought the organizers had let a beggar slip into the wedding reception." She laughed loudly, covering her mouth theatrically. but her voice was deliberately raised so that the entire hall turned to look. My heart seemed to stop. Those words weren't a joke. They were sharp sarcasm, turning insult into public humiliation. Charles chimed in, his tone dripping with contempt. Yes, farmers by background, of course. They're probably more used to barns than places like this. Don't worry, we won't kick you out as long as you don't dirty the floor. The disdainful remarks about their farming origins were uttered without any restraint, as if they were telling a funny story. Around them, whispers spread and a few people stifled giggles. My parents stood frozen, their faces flushing red before looking down, unable to respond. As if any defense would be pointless in that space where status and money dictated everything. I saw my father grip my mother's hand tightly, his shoulders trembling slightly. My mother, the strong woman who had endured so many hardships, now only bowed her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. Around them, a few bursts of laughter erupted, and amused eyes followed the scene like they were watching a comedy play. Respect had completely vanished, replaced by morbid curiosity. "Look, they're really embarrassed now," a man's voice whispered near me. I felt my blood boiling, my body burning as if ready to explode. I rushed to my parents' side, gently reassuring them. "Mom, Dad, don't pay attention to what they said. I'm here now." My eyes blazed with fury, my body tense as a coiled spring. I was about to speak up, to yell in Charles and Donna's faces that they were despicable cowards, but Charlie, my mother, held my arm tightly. Wesley, my father, shook his head, his eyes signaling, "Don't do anything foolish right now, son. Today is Hannah's day." His voice trembled, but it was resolute. I had to swallow my anger, forcing it down because this was my sister's big day. Ruining it would break Hannah's heart, and I couldn't do that. But the humiliation didn't stop there. It was only the beginning. Less than a minute later, my brother-in-law, Megan Mitchell, appeared. He strode over with an imposing air, his sleek black tuxedo perfectly fitted to his tall frame. Megan, 32 years old, the only son of Charles and Donna, always acted as if he were the center of the universe. He didn't hide his superior attitude, his eyes scanning my parents from head to toe with cold judgment, as if inspecting defective merchandise. Instead of diffusing the situation, Megan openly reinforced it. "Oh, you've arrived? Your presence at this event is only by the grace of our family. Don't think you're qualified to stand as equals with anyone here." His voice rang out, full of arrogance, causing the crowd to stir again. "They should know their place and be careful with every action, because if they cause any trouble, they won't have the means to compensate or take responsibility." My entire body went rigid, my fists clenched so tightly they shook. Witnessing my parents' dignity being trampled in front of everyone, the suppressed rage choked me. My heart raced wildly, blood pounding in my ears until they rang. I wanted to lunge at Megan, to punch that smug face, to scream that he was just a fraud hiding his own weakness. But I couldn't. Not now. Hannah was somewhere in the dressing room preparing for the ceremony, and her radiant smile was the only thing holding me back. I gritted my teeth, took deep breaths, trying to stay calm. But deep inside, a fire was smoldering, waiting for the day it would erupt. I stood there, watching Megan laughing and chatting with his group of friends, his shiny black tuxedo glistening under the crystal lights. Every gesture he made, every fake smile felt like pouring more oil onto the fire. My parents were still standing in the secluded corner, forcing smiles for the rare guests who bothered to speak to them. But I could clearly see the trembling in my father's hands and the furtive tears on my mother's cheeks. No, I couldn't let this continue. I had to do something right now before everything crossed the line. I took another deep breath, trying to keep my face calm. I couldn't show my anger. I couldn't make a scene in front of the crowd. I walked toward Megan, each step heavy as if I were treading on burning coals. He was raising his glass with a local official, his loud laughter echoing. I stopped beside him, smiled politely, and said briefly, "Megan, there are a few matters regarding the wedding ceremony that we need to discuss privately. Can you spare a moment?" My voice was steady, neither too loud nor too soft, as if it were just a normal conversation about the event schedule. Megan turned to look at me, his eyes sweeping over me with indifference. He shrugged as though my existence wasn't worth his attention. "Oh, sure. Lead the way," he said, drawing out his words, the corner of his mouth curling into a sneer. I placed my hand on his elbow, not forcefully but firmly enough to guide him away from the crowd. The gesture made him pause slightly, but he didn't resist. He just followed with an indifferent expression. At the same time, I quickly glanced toward my parents and gave them a subtle, reassuring nod. My eyes met my father's, and I saw him nod faintly back, as if he understood that I wouldn't cross any boundaries. It was a silent promise. I would handle everything, but not today, and certainly not in a way that would shatter Hannah's joyful day. We turned into the narrow hallway behind the ballroom. The soothing violin music faded behind us, gradually thinning out until it vanished, leaving only the dry echo of our footsteps on the marble floor. My heart pounded fiercely, adrenaline surging, but I forced myself to breathe evenly. Stay calm. Stay in control. Don't let emotions take the wheel. We entered a discreet preparation room typically used by staff to organize items. The small room had a few folded chairs and a dressing table covered with a white cloth. Soft light from the wall lamps cast long shadows on the floor. I closed the door behind us. The click of the lock rang out clearly, completely severing us from the outside world. Now it was just the two of us, isolated from the glamorous crowd. I turned around and looked him straight in the eye. The calm expression on my face vanished, replaced by a low, menacing voice full of threat. "Megan, if the humiliation toward my parents continues, you will pay the price. Don't think I'll let this slide." The words came out like a sharp blade slicing through the silent air. I felt the blood rush to my face, but I stood firm without blinking. Megan looked at me for a second, then burst out laughing. The laughter echoed in the small room full of contempt. His eyes sparkled with amusement, as if my warning were nothing more than a harmless joke. "Pay the price? Are you kidding me, Kevin? Who do you think you are to talk like that?" He shook his head, still laughing, hands casually in his pockets. I clenched my fists so tightly that my knuckles turned white, nails digging painfully into my palms. Rage surged, making me want to lunge at him to smash that smug face, but I stood still, not taking another step. I had to restrain myself, for Hannah, for today. He continued to provoke me, his voice arrogant. "You wouldn't dare make a scene at your own sister's wedding. Everything here belongs to my family, the hotel, the guests, even the bride. You're just some mediocre financial advisor from Ann Arbor. Don't delude yourself." His words stabbed at my heart like knives. He was partly right. Today was Hannah's day, and I couldn't ruin it. But that arrogance, the way he belittled everything, made the fire inside me burn even hotter. I imagined him on his knees begging for forgiveness, but no, not yet. Megan laughed loudly once more, turned and walked out first, pushing the door open without looking back. He left me in the silent room as if the conversation had been mere pointless entertainment. The door closed. The music from outside rushed in, but I stood there, breathing heavily, trying to regain my composure. I returned to the ballroom, trying to blend back into the crowd as if nothing had happened. But the ceremony continued, and the disrespect shifted to a more subtle form, like hidden needles pricking quietly. When everyone was seated, my parents were relegated to a table near the service entrance, far from the main stage. It was the most obscure corner of the room, where staff constantly passed through with trays of food, the clinking of dishes resounding. They were separated from close relatives and important guests, as if they were uninvited visitors. My father sat upright, trying to maintain a composed expression, but I saw my mother clutching her napkin tightly, eyes fixed on the table. How did it come to this? I wondered, but I knew full well this was the Mitchell family's way of asserting dominance, subtle yet cruel. During the main ceremonies, they were repeatedly overlooked. When the MC introduced both families, my parents' names were not mentioned, as if they didn't exist. They weren't invited on stage for family photos, even though Hannah had requested it beforehand. I saw her glance toward us, her smile faltering slightly, but then she continued, not wanting to make a fuss. The pitying yet curious glances from guests made my parents shrink even more. An older woman seated nearby whispered, "Poor things, they must not be used to places like this." Meanwhile, the groom's side treated it as perfectly natural, laughing and chatting cheerfully as if nothing were amiss. Charles and Donna sat at the head table, toasting with officials, ignoring us completely. Even I was pushed to the sidelines. Handshakes from the groom's friends were cursory, greetings half-hearted. "Oh, you're the bride's brother. Congratulations." Then they turned away immediately. The deliberate indifference from people who had previously seemed friendly, as if I were invisible. I silently observed, memorizing every glance, every gesture, every small detail that others thought I would overlook. Donna's contemptuous look as she passed by, Charles's fake smile, and especially Megan. He was holding Hannah on stage, but his eyes sneaked a glance toward me, full of challenge. I remembered it all, like entries being added to a ledger of debts. Then that moment arrived. Hannah, radiant as she walked in her pure white wedding dress, holding a bouquet of roses, her smile shining brightly under the lights. She looked like an angel, and the crowd applauded enthusiastically. I looked at her, my heart tightening with love and worry. This was her day, the day she had dreamed of since childhood. I chose to endure, swallowing my anger whole so as not to ruin this momentous occasion. But deep inside, I had clearly drawn the line that had just been crossed. There was no turning back. From now on, everything would be different. The reception dragged on for a few more hours, filled with lively dances, endless toasts, and glasses of shimmering red wine being refilled constantly. I tried to join in, chatting and laughing with distant and close relatives, but every smile I forced felt stiff, like a thin mask barely concealing the storm raging inside me. When the clock struck 10 in the evening, the crowd began to thin out, and Hannah hugged me tightly before getting into the bridal car with Megan. "Thank you, Kevin. Today was wonderful," she whispered, her eyes sparkling with happiness. I nodded, holding her close in my arms, but I didn't dare say much for fear my voice would crack. Megan stood beside her, patting my shoulder with a fake smile. "Congratulations, brother-in-law. Your sister is mine now." His words cut like a knife, but I only nodded coldly and turned away. After the wedding ended, I drove my parents back to their home on the outskirts of Mount Pleasant. The drive from Ann Arbor took over an hour, passing through pitch-black fields and quiet small streets. My parents sat in the back seat, silent the entire way. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw my father staring out the window, his weathered face flickering under the sporadic streetlights. My mother held his hand tightly, eyes closed as if trying to sleep, but I knew she was holding back tears. "Are you tired, Mom and Dad? Get some rest when we get home," I said, trying to sound cheerful. My father nodded. "Yes, drive safely, son." When we arrived, the old wooden family house appeared under the moonlight with its white fence and small vegetable garden out front. I helped them out of the car and hugged them tightly. "I'll come visit tomorrow," I promised, then watched them walk inside, their weary figures making my heart ache painfully. I turned the car around and headed back to my small apartment in Ann Arbor, where only loneliness and financial figures awaited me. On the empty road home, the images from the ceremony replayed in my mind like a slow-motion film. Donna Mitchell's sneering laughter, Megan's contemptuous gaze, and my parents' flushed faces, all of it vivid and unrelenting, making me grip the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The daytime humiliation hadn't even cooled when memories of the days leading up to the wedding suddenly surged up, like a flood sweeping away every other thought. I remembered it clearly, as if it had happened just yesterday. A week before the wedding, the two families had met at a small dinner, supposedly for introductions. It was the Mitchells' idea, and they chose an upscale Italian restaurant in downtown Ann Arbor, where a single meal could cost as much as my parents' monthly income. I had been worried from the start, but Hannah persuaded me. "Come on, bro, it's just a get-together. I want everything to go smoothly." I agreed for her sake. We arrived at the restaurant a little early, my parents dressed as neatly as they could. My father in his only intact suit, my mother in a newly bought sweater. Hannah looked radiant in a light blue dress, holding a small purse. I drove everyone there, trying to keep the mood light by telling jokes along the way. Dad, remember when Hannah got cake smeared all over her face at her birthday? I laughed, and my parents laughed too, but I could feel the tension in the air. When we arrived, the Mitchells were already seated at the VIP table. Charles in a sleek gray suit, Donna wearing a sparkling diamond necklace, and Megan in the middle, phone in hand as if checking something important. They stood to greet us with polite smiles, but from the very beginning, Megan's parents maintained a subtle air of superiority. They talked a lot about their social connections. "We just attended a party with the governor last week," Charles boasted, "and personal achievements. Megan just signed a big contract with a major company in New York, 6-figure salary." Those remarks were delivered casually but laced with comparative jabs. "And what about you? Farming in Mount Pleasant must be tough, right? Not like in the city where everything is more convenient." I sat there, choking down my frustration, feeling like we were at a job interview rather than a meeting between future in-laws. My parents were put in the position of listening more than speaking. Every time my father tried to chime in, "Well, on our farm we also," Donna would interrupt with another story. "Oh, speaking of the countryside, we vacationed in Napa Valley last week. The wine there is absolutely divine." The disparity in status became obvious yet hard to pinpoint, like a fog enveloping the entire table. Hannah sat next to Megan, smiling brightly, lightly touching his hand, seemingly oblivious to the tense atmosphere. I observed it all, my irritation building gradually. Why were they behaving like this? As if we were inferiors who needed to be educated about the world of the elite. When the main course arrived, expensive steak plates that my parents rarely ate, the conversation shifted to the wedding arrangements. Charles wiped his mouth with a silk napkin, then said seriously, "According to old traditions, the bride's family should cover the entire cost of the wedding. That's how you show thoroughness and respect to the groom's side." His words sounded like a command, not a suggestion. My parents froze, knives and forks suspended in midair. I saw my mother look at my father, eyes wide with shock. $180,000 for a wedding? To us, that was a fortune. But seeing Hannah sitting there, radiant and happily chatting, "Oh, Mom and Dad, the wedding is going to be so beautiful." They both nodded in agreement. "All right, we'll take care of it," my father said, his voice slightly trembling. They feared their daughter would be seen as disadvantaged or face gossip. Feared she would be heartbroken if everything fell apart. I felt the injustice clearly and wanted to object immediately. "Sir, ma'am, those outdated customs don't apply anymore, do they? Why not split the costs?" But at that moment, I didn't know where to begin. Everything was cloaked in the guise of tradition and old customs like an impenetrable armor. Megan chimed in with a smirk. "Don't worry. We'll provide moral support." "Moral support?" I gritted my teeth, swallowing my anger. The meeting ended with cold handshakes, and on the drive home, the atmosphere in the car was heavy. "What do you think about this, Mom and Dad?" I asked. My father sighed. "It's fine. After all, it's for Hannah." After that meeting, the groom's family's disdain became more overt, no longer hidden. They sent emails demanding changes to the reception menu, adding luxurious items like a live orchestra and imported flowers without consulting us. The seating arrangements and planning meetings were the same, the Mitchells always at the head of the table while we were pushed to the edges. When the wedding budget estimate was sent over, the total reached $180,000, far beyond my parents' means. It included extravagant items they had never even considered. A 5-star hotel, a famous photographer from New York, even a limousine and fireworks. I read it in shock, my heart pounding. "Mom, Dad, we have to negotiate this. In modern times, there's no reason the bride's family should bear the entire burden," I advised firmly. But my parents didn't want their daughter's wedding to fall apart. They chose to endure silently, borrowing from acquaintances. "Uncle, could you lend us some money? We'll pay it back gradually." Mortgaging assets, selling their most valuable possessions like the old truck and a few small plots of land. I watched them stay up all night calculating, my mother crying quietly as she sold her old wedding ring. "For Hannah's happiness," she said, voice choking. Back on the empty road in the present, I gripped the steering wheel tightly, stunned that all those silent sacrifices had not only gone unappreciated, but had led to the humiliating events at the wedding today. The car sped through the night, cold wind rushing through the window, but the anger inside me burned hot. How dare they do this? Why couldn't Hannah see those red flags? Those memories made me tremble, and I knew, from now on I had to take action. I could no longer let my parents suffer anymore. My apartment in Ann Arbor was shrouded in darkness when I pushed the door open, the sound of the lock clicking like a lonely whisper. It was late at night. The wall clock showed 2 in the morning, but sleep evaded me like an enemy. I took off my coat, tossed it onto the sofa, then collapsed onto the bed, staring wide-eyed at the ceiling speckled with the flickering streetlight filtering through the thin curtains. The chilly atmosphere of this small room with stacks of financial documents piled up on the desk seemed to make me even more alert. I tossed and turned, trying to close my eyes, but the images from the wedding flooded back like an endless nightmare. My parents bowing their heads under the sarcastic remarks, Hannah smiling radiantly in blissful ignorance, and Megan with his smug, sneering grin. Why would a family that constantly boasted about their wealth, like the Mitchells, refuse to contribute even a portion of the wedding costs? That question buzzed in my mind like a persistent bee. I sat up, turned on the desk lamp, and fetched a glass of water from the kitchen. The cool liquid slid down my throat, but it couldn't extinguish the smoldering flame of suspicion. The way they had made their demand that day replayed clearly in my head. No discussion, no negotiation, as if it had been premeditated to shift the entire burden onto the other side. During that introductory dinner, Charles Mitchell sat ramrod straight, his tone like he was reading from a business contract. "According to tradition, the bride's family should cover everything," he had said, his eyes not meeting my parents but gliding over them as if we were mere impersonal figures on a balance sheet. Donna smiled, twirling her wine glass as though enjoying a theatrical performance. "And Megan?" He just nodded, eyes glued to his phone as if the matter wasn't worth his attention. I remembered wanting to stand up and shout in their faces that this wasn't the feudal era, but Hannah was sitting beside me, her hand tightly gripping mine under the table, her eyes pleading, "Please, Kevin, don't make a scene." And I stayed silent like a coward. The more I thought about it, the more unnatural the whole thing seemed. If they were truly as affluent as they claimed, they wouldn't need to hide behind vague excuses like tradition or respect for the groom's family. They bragged about their mansion, luxury cars, and connections with officials, so why force my parents to shoulder the full $180,000? My parents had sold land, borrowed money, stayed up all night worrying while the Mitchells sat back and reaped the benefits. No, something was off here. My heart beat faster, adrenaline surging like when I analyzed a high-risk investment. I couldn't keep speculating. I had to uncover the truth. I decided to investigate myself starting that very night. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts, looking for names that could help. As a financial advisor, I had a network, not as vast as the Mitchells boasted, but sufficient to dig deep. The next morning, I woke up with dark circles under my eyes, but with iron resolve. I called Tom, an old college friend who worked at a local bank in Ann Arbor. He was now a credit specialist with access to the financial records of many companies. "Hey, Tom. Long time no see. Can you help me look into Mitchell Enterprises a bit?" "Just out of curiosity," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, like I was inquiring about a routine investment. Tom laughed over the phone. "Kevin, you haven't changed. You're always digging." "All right, I'll check the files. But promise to keep it confidential. This is internal information." We caught up with a few old stories, then Tom promised to call back after work. My heart pounded all day. Office tasks passed in a hazy blur. I checked emails, met clients, but my mind was fixated on that call. Late in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was Tom, his voice lower. "Kevin," I looked into it. "The Mitchell Company isn't as solid as it appears. They're buried in debt. Cash flow is critically tight. They've mortgaged almost everything from real estate to office equipment. I see several short-term loans coming due with sky-high interest rates. Without fresh capital, they're in serious trouble." I slumped into my chair, gripping the phone tightly. "Thanks, man. I owe you a beer." The call ended, but my head was spinning. So the glossy facade was starting to crack. They weren't as wealthy as they pretended. They were drowning in debt. How dare they treat my family like that? Anger mixed with a sense of satisfaction. I was getting closer to the truth, but I needed more evidence. I didn't stop there. Next, I reached out to Sarah, a friend who worked as a corporate accountant in Detroit. We had collaborated on a few projects, and she was sharp with financial reports. "Sarah, can you help me review the recent situation of Mitchell Enterprises? I heard rumors they're struggling," I texted, followed by a quick call. Sarah agreed, and we arranged to meet at a small cafe halfway. When we sat down, Sarah slid a printed stack of papers across the table. "Kevin, I dug around from public sources and a few contacts. Their revenue has plummeted in the last 2 quarters, down 30% from last year. Payments are delayed, suppliers are complaining. They're constantly rolling over loans to pay off old ones." I flipped through the documents, my heart racing. Numbers don't lie. Declining revenue charts, mounting liabilities. The full picture was gradually emerging before my eyes. The glamour, the boasting, and the superior attitude were just a thin veneer hiding a crumbling reality from within. They weren't wealthy tycoons, they were desperate debtors. I sat in the cafe looking out at the bustling streets of Ann Arbor, but my heart felt heavy. How dare they humiliate my parents when they themselves were the vulnerable ones? Anger turned to worry. Hannah was caught in the middle of it all. She thought Megan was a prince, but in reality, he was just a fraud. From that moment, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. If I stood by, the ones who would pay the price wouldn't just be my parents, it would be my sister too. Hannah could lose everything if it all collapsed. I had to protect her, even if it meant confronting them head on. I sat in that bar until late at night, the beer in my hand long gone cold, my mind reeling from the numbers and truths I had just uncovered. Mitchell Enterprises, that imposing-sounding name, was in reality nothing more than a sandcastle teetering in the face of a storm. Piled-up debts, plummeting revenue, assets mortgaged to the hilt. They were good at hiding it, with their glamorous parties and social connections, but now I could see clearly. It was all just a facade, and Hannah, my little sister, was being swept into that vortex without even realizing it. I had to tell her, immediately. I picked up my phone and texted Hannah, "Sis, I need to see you urgently. Our usual cafe in Ann Arbor, tomorrow morning at 10. It's important, just the 2 of us." The message sent, and I waited, my heart pounding as if anticipating an explosion. The next morning, I woke up early, showered, and put on a clean shirt, trying to look normal. On the way to the cafe, I rehearsed my words in my head hundreds of times. How could I convince Hannah without hurting her? She was in the honeymoon phase of her marriage. Their honeymoon had just ended, and everything in her world was surely rose-colored. The familiar cafe, a cozy little corner with the aroma of freshly ground beans and soft jazz music, was where we used to confide in each other since our college days. I arrived early, chose a secluded table in the corner, and ordered a black coffee, no sugar, to stay alert. Every minute felt like an hour, and I kept checking my watch, worried she wouldn't show up, or worse, that she'd come with Megan. Then the door opened and Hannah walked in. The moment she saw me, her face lit up instantly. She hurried over with a smile so bright it seemed to erase all the exhaustion from my own face. She called out to me, her voice full of excitement. "Kevin, how have you been?" She threw her arms around me in a tight, familiar hug. Her long hair cascaded down, carrying that familiar scent, and her light summer dress made her look exactly like a woman deeply in love, blissfully happy, completely unaware of the cracks quietly forming around her. We sat down, and she immediately started chatting animatedly about life after the wedding. Bro, our honeymoon in Hawaii was amazing. Blue ocean, white sand, and Megan was so romantic. He even bought me this pearl necklace. Look how pretty it is. She held up her hand, the expensive jewelry sparkling in the light. I smiled and listened, but my heart tightened. She talked about their new home, evenings cooking together, and future plans. We're going to buy a bigger house with a backyard for the kids to play in. Every word was overflowing with joy, and I felt like the bearer of bad news, but I couldn't hold back. I listened for a moment, nodding along, but then I took a deep breath and slowly steered the conversation towards something serious. Hannah, I'm really happy for you, truly. But there's something important I need to discuss with you privately. There are things I have to tell you because I'm worried about you. My voice dropped lower and she paused, her smile fading slightly. What is it, Kevin? Why do you look so serious? She asked, gripping her latte tightly. I looked her straight in the eyes, trying to keep my voice calm but firm. I've looked into the Mitchell family's finances. Not out of jealousy or anything. It's because I'm concerned for you. Their financial situation is unstable, Hannah. The company is drowning in debt, cash flow is critically strained, and revenue has dropped sharply. Many assets are already mortgaged and they're hiding the risks. Without new capital, bankruptcy is only a matter of time. Hannah froze for a moment, the smile on her lips stiffening as if frozen. Her eyes widened, and I could clearly see confusion flash across her face. But very quickly, she shook her head in denial, forcing a cheerful tone. Kevin, you must be mistaken. Everything I've seen is perfectly stable. Megan and his parents live comfortably. There's no sign of trouble. Maybe the information you have isn't accurate. I saw her clench her hands as if trying to convince herself. I tried to explain further, emphasizing that this wasn't emotional speculation but information from multiple reliable sources. Listen to me. I contacted friends at a bank and an accountant. It all matches. Massive debt, delayed payments, revenue down 30%. They're rolling over loans just to survive. I'm worried for you, Hannah. If it all collapses, you'll be dragged down with it. Suddenly, Hannah stopped short. The smile vanished completely from her face, her cheeks flushing with anger. She set her coffee cup down hard on the table. Kevin, what are you doing? She said quickly, her voice rising. Why are you digging into other people's business? Are you jealous? Or are you just overthinking everything? Before I could respond, she continued without giving me a chance to speak. I knew it, she said, her tone sharper. I noticed it at the wedding. You're prejudiced against my husband's family. But this is going too far. A few people at nearby tables turned to look. I sat there stunned, feeling as if I'd just been slapped in public. Hannah took a deep breath, then went on, as if trying to convince herself more than me. He's very successful, Kevin. The company is expanding. He has connections everywhere. New York, California, friends all over. My in-laws are prudent and thoughtful. They bought us a house and took care of everything from A to Z. She stared at me, her voice resolute. Stop thinking badly of them. Not everyone who's rich is bad like you seem to believe. The certainty in her words left me speechless. I suddenly realized that for Hannah right now, everything was still sparkling and intact, like a bubble that hadn't yet been touched. I tried to lower my voice and speak more slowly. Hannah, I'm not jealous. I'm just worried about you. The numbers don't lie. I just want you to see. She cut me off, eyes glistening with tears. Stop it, Kevin. I don't want to hear any more. Stop this investigation right now, and don't interfere in my marriage. She leaned toward me, her voice trembling but firm. I'm grown up. I know what I'm doing. Those words cut through me like ice. The cafe seemed to fall silent with only the faint jazz music playing in the corner. Hannah stood up, gathering her bag with quick, angry movements. I watched her, knowing that saying anything more right now would only make things worse. I said softly, my voice hoarse, "All right, I promise I won't do anything else." But I knew I was lying. I couldn't stop. As Hannah got up to leave, I called after her. "Hannah, wait. Just be careful and take care of yourself, okay?" She turned back for a second, looking at me with eyes mixed with anger and affection, then pushed the door open and walked out without a word. All the remaining words choked in my throat. I sat there alone with my cold coffee, staring out at the bustling streets of Ann Arbor through the window. People passed by laughing and talking, cars sped along, but my world felt like it was crumbling. Was Hannah really that blind? Couldn't she see the signs? Or had love clouded her judgment? I remembered moments from our childhood. Hannah running around the farm, me teaching her to ride a bike, and now she was rushing headlong into a trap without realizing it. A wave of helplessness surged through me, making me want to punch the table, but I held back. There had to be another way. I would watch, wait, but not intervene directly. Not yet. I left the cafe with heavy steps, as if carrying a massive rock on my shoulders. On the way back to the office, the chilly autumn wind whipped against my face, but it couldn't calm the chaos swirling in my mind. Hannah, my little sister, had always been the smart, quick-witted one. Yet now she was blindly defending Megan and his family. I returned to my daily routine, trying to immerse myself in work to avoid being consumed by worries about Hannah. My office in Ann Arbor, with its stacks of financial files and computer screens flickering with data, became a temporary refuge. I threw myself into client meetings, stock analyses, and investment planning. Anything to push images of Hannah out of my head. The first few days were tough. Every morning when I woke up, I checked my phone hoping for a message from her, but there were only work emails. I called my parents a few times, telling them about the meeting, and my mother comforted me. "Don't worry too much, son. Hannah's stubborn, but she'll realize it eventually." My father sighed. "Let time prove it." But would time be on our side? I wondered, while the Mitchell Company could collapse at any moment. I tried to live normally. Early morning gym sessions to relieve stress, quick solo dinners with simple salads, and reading financial books late into the night to forget. But at night, sleep came fitfully, filled with jumbled dreams of the wedding, Megan's mocking laughter, and Hannah in tears. I would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, telling myself, "You have to stay strong. For the family." Then one afternoon, as I sat in my office staring at stock charts on the screen, my phone rang. It was my parents' number from the farm. I answered immediately, trying to sound cheerful. "Mom, Dad, I'm a bit busy, but what's up?" But my father's voice was serious, unlike usual. "Kevin, come home right away. We need to talk." He didn't explain why, just that, and hung up. My heart tightened, a vague fear rising within me. What had happened? Were my parents sick? Was there a problem with the farm? I quickly packed up, asked my boss for early leave, family emergency, and rushed to my car. On the drive to Mount Pleasant, along the familiar road lined with endless cornfields under a gray sky, I kept wondering if something serious had occurred at the farm. The unease clung to me relentlessly, like a shadow trailing behind. The car sped along, the engine roaring in sync with my racing heartbeat. "Please, God, don't let it be bad news," I muttered, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Images of my parents frail and ill, or the farm on fire, flashed through my mind. Why hadn't Dad explained? Why did his voice sound so strange? The closer I got, the greater the anxiety grew, forcing me to pull over once to take deep breaths and try to calm down. As soon as I arrived, I burst into the house in a panic, the door wide open without knocking. "Mom! Dad, what's wrong?" I shouted, breathing heavily. But then the scene before me made me freeze. My parents were sitting calmly at the dining table, waiting with steaming cups of tea and a plate of homemade cookies. There were no signs of emergency, no ambulance, no tears. My father looked at me and smiled. "Son, calm down. Why do you look like you've seen a ghost? My mother chuckled and stood up to hug me. You worried too much. Sit down. I let out a sigh of relief, my legs going weak as I slumped into a chair. My heart was still pounding, but the fear gradually faded. You scared me half to death. Why call me home urgently without explaining anything? My parents smiled at my reaction, reassuring me that everything was fine. They just had something very important to discuss. My mother poured me some tea while my father retrieved a thick stack of documents from the cabinet. Drink this first, then I'll explain. I sipped the hot tea, trying to regain my composure, but my mind was still uneasy. Then my father began, his voice warm and steady. Our family farm has just been compensated $2.4 million. A major infrastructure project was approved, a new highway running right through the entire property. I was stunned, the teacup nearly slipping from my hand. The farm compensated $2.4 million? The number echoed in my head like a dream. The farm, where I grew up, with its fields, barns, and childhood memories, would now be taken, but in exchange for an enormous sum. Is this real, Dad? How did it happen so suddenly? I asked, my voice trembling. He nodded and explained. The project had been in discussion for a long time, but it was only now official. The compensation was fair, and after careful consideration they had signed the papers. But even more surprising, my parents said that after much thought, they had decided to entrust me with full management of the money, trusting my financial acumen, understanding of money, and foresight for the family. You're a financial advisor, you know how to make money grow. We're getting old and don't want to take risks. We'll use this to live better, and you can look out for Hannah too, my father said, his eyes glistening. My mother nodded. We trust you completely. I was overwhelmed by their decision, shocked and deeply moved. Tears rolled down my cheeks without me realizing it. Silently grateful for their absolute faith in me, I hugged them tightly. I won't let you down. I promise. That moment felt like a turning point, dispelling some of my worries about Hannah. Now I had the means to protect the family. In the weeks that followed, once all the legal procedures were complete, the money was officially transferred to the account. I chose to keep it confidential, sharing it with no one outside the family, no friends, no colleagues, and especially not telling Hannah yet. Let her realize it on her own first, I thought. I spent time researching thoroughly, investing methodically, prioritizing safe and sustainable options over risky, flashy ones. I studied the stock market, government bonds, real estate, everything to ensure growth with minimal risk. Every evening I sat at my computer calculating, creating spreadsheets and charts, and consulting a few trusted experts for advice. Safety first, I reminded myself, thinking of my parents' sacrifices. After discussing with them, we decided to buy a comfortable house in the suburbs of Ann Arbor, fully equipped and suitable for long-term retirement. The house had a spacious backyard, bright bedrooms, and a modern kitchen, not extravagant but warm and cozy. I led my parents through the hallways, opening each room. I think this place is perfect for you, I said slowly. Quiet, airy, and not too far from the city. You'll be more comfortable resting here. My father paused to look out at the backyard, silent for a moment before nodding. His voice softened. Being close to you like this makes everything easier. We're old now. Living near our child brings peace of mind. I moved my parents in to live with me, proactively arranging my life to balance work with daily care and support for them. Waking early to cook breakfast, chatting in the evenings, taking them for park walks on weekends. These became my top priorities. The old farm was now a memory, but a new life had begun. And deep down, I knew this money could be the key to saving Hannah when the time came. The anxiety lingered, but now I was stronger. This turning point changed everything. The first few months in the new house passed in a fragile peace, like a thin shell concealing the storm brewing inside me. My parents adapted quickly to city life. My mother planted a few pots of vegetables on the balcony. My father sat reading old newspapers by the window, and we gathered every evening for simple but warm meals. "Son, you're so busy, yet you still take care of us. You're wonderful," my mother often said, stroking my hair like she did when I was little. I smiled, but the smile never reached my eyes. My work as a financial advisor remained demanding, with long meetings and numbers dancing across the screen, but my thoughts kept drifting to Hannah. She called occasionally, her voice cheerful as she talked about married life, but I could hear the strain in every word. "I'm fine, Kevin, don't worry," she would say, but I knew she wasn't. The information about the Mitchells still haunted me, the mounting debts, the declining revenue, and I wondered how long it would take for that facade to crack. I tried not to interfere as I had promised her that day in the cafe, but every night after my parents had gone to sleep, I sat alone in the living room, scrolling through financial reports or simply staring out the window as anxiety surged. Ann Arbor in autumn was beautiful with its falling golden leaves, but to me, everything felt gray and bleak. I called Hannah a few times, but our conversations were always brief. She avoided deeper questions about Megan. "He's very busy, but he treats me well," she insisted. I swallowed hard, remembering the angry look in her eyes when I warned her about her in-laws' finances. Would she ever realize the truth? Or was love still blinding her? That helplessness kept me awake many nights, but I told myself to wait. Time would prove everything. Then one night a heavy rainstorm struck, as if the heavens themselves were raging on my behalf. Rain pounded on the roof, wind howled through the cracks, and lightning flashed across the pitch-black sky. That evening I had stayed late at the office, trying to finish a complicated investment report to distract myself from my worries. It was 10 o'clock when I left the building. The rain was already pouring down. I dashed to my car, my coat soaked in seconds, and drove home through the deserted streets of Ann Arbor. The headlights cut through the thick curtain of rain, the wipers screeching relentlessly. The drive felt longer than usual because of the downpour. Water pooled on the road, forcing me to drive slowly to avoid skidding. My heart felt heavy as I thought about Hannah. Was she safe in this storm? Was Megan home with her, or was he sneaking around somewhere? As my car turned onto the familiar street near home, the headlights suddenly swept across a figure walking along the roadside, staggering under the rain. I slowed down and squinted through the water-streaked windshield. The figure was small, clothes drenched, head bowed as if fighting the wind and rain. My heart tightened. It looked so familiar. I pulled over, rolled down the window, and shouted over the roar of the rain, "Excuse me, do you need help?" The figure turned around and I froze in shock. It was Hannah. My sister was standing there in the torrential rain, her face pale under the car lights, her whole body trembling from cold and panic. Rain streamed down her hair, her clothes clung to her skin, and her red, swollen eyes were filled with pain. "Hannah, what are you doing out here?" I yelled, my voice breaking with shock as I jumped out of the car without even turning off the engine. I ran to her, the wind and rain stinging my face, and pulled her into a tight embrace. She was shaking violently, unable to speak, only burying her face in my shoulder and sobbing uncontrollably. "Get in the car, you're freezing," I said, my voice trembling as I guided her to the passenger seat and slammed the door. I got back in, cranked the heater to maximum, the engine humming loudly, and wrapped her in the spare jacket from the back seat. Hannah huddled in the seat, her breathing still ragged, clutching the warm cup of water I pulled from the thermos in the car. I drove home, the short distance feeling endless as I kept glancing at her. "What happened? Why were you walking in the rain? Your house is far from here," I asked, my voice full of worry. But she only bowed her head, her shoulders shaking. Seeing Hannah like this tore at my heart. I knew my long-held fears had finally come true. She wasn't okay, and everything had shattered. When we reached home, I parked quickly, turning off the lights so as not to wake my parents, and helped Hannah in through the back door. She walked unsteadily, leaving wet footprints on the floor. I led her to the living room, turned on a dim lamp, and wrapped more warm blankets around her. "Sit here. I'll get you some hot water," I whispered, going to the kitchen to pour a cup from the kettle. Hannah held the cup with trembling hands, the water sloshing, and I had to steady it to prevent spills. It took a long while until her body and mind began to settle from the warmth of the heater and the hot drink, for her to calm enough to look up at me. Her eyes were red and puffy, mascara smeared, and her gaunt face filled me with sorrow. I gently pressed her hand and asked, "Tell me what happened. Why were you walking in a storm like this? Did you run all the way from your house?" In choking sobs, Hannah finally confessed everything she had kept hidden all this time. Her voice broke as tears streamed down her face. "I found out Megan's been cheating. With his secretary, it's been going on for months, very carefully hidden. I found messages, photos together, everything. I went numb, blood rushing to my head." She continued, her voice shaking. "Every time I confronted him or tried to stop it, he didn't just deny it, he became aggressive. He yelled in my face, smashed things, and used violence. The first time it was just a slap, but later it got worse. He threatened divorce if I dared resist, saying I wasn't worthy, that I was just a burden." Her words stabbed my heart like knives. I imagined Hannah cowering before Megan's rage, and my blood boiled. How dare he? This man, drowning in debt, hiding his own failures, dared to hurt my sister. Hannah sobbed. Tonight I confronted him again. I couldn't take it anymore, Kevin. His anger exploded. He beat me brutally until I couldn't bear it. My head hurts, my arms and legs are bruised. I had to run away in the rain. I took a taxi partway but ran out of money, so I walked the rest to get to you. I didn't know where else to go. The rage inside me surged like a fire that had been smoldering for days, finally erupting. I stood up abruptly, my body rigid, nearly losing control. "What? He dared to hit you. I'll kill him. I'm going to find him right now," I shouted, my voice echoing in the living room, fists clenched and shaking. The image of Megan's smug smile at the wedding flashed before me, and I wanted to rush out, drive to his house, and smash his face in. Blood pounded in my ears as I stepped toward the door, ready to face the storm outside. But Hannah quickly stopped me, grabbing my shirt tightly and pleading, "Don't. Please don't make things worse, Kevin. I just want to stay here tonight to calm down. Don't tell Mom and Dad, they'd worry themselves sick. I just need to rest." Her voice was weak, eyes glistening with tears, and I could see the fear in them, not just of Megan, but of everything falling apart completely. Seeing my sister so emotionally drained, with bruises visible under her wet clothes, I painfully nodded in agreement. "All right, I promise. You can stay here tonight. I won't do anything," I said hoarsely, swallowing my anger. I quietly prepared a place for her to sleep. The living room sofa pulled out into a bed with warm blankets and soft pillows. I made some hot soup in the kitchen, coaxed her to eat a little for strength, and sat beside her until she finally drifted off in exhaustion. But deep down, I knew that from this rainy night onward, everything had entered an irreversible phase. Megan had crossed the line, and I would no longer let my sister suffer. The rain continued to fall outside the window, thunder rumbling, but the real storm was brewing in my heart. Tomorrow I would act, not with fists, but in a smarter way. Hannah deserved to be saved, and I would be the one to do it. That night I lingered in the living room for a long time. Only when I was certain Hannah had fallen into a deep sleep under the warm blankets, her breathing steady and the tension gone from her face, did I finally stand up and return to my own bedroom. The next morning when I stepped into the living room, I found it unusually empty. Hannah had left at some point. The blanket was neatly folded on the sofa, and on the table lay only a small note. "Thank you for last night. I'm okay now. Don't worry about me." My heart tightened. She had chosen that way again, silently slipping away, returning to endure everything alone as if the previous night had never happened. I stood motionless for a long while in the quiet room, a heavy sense of helplessness rising within me. Why didn't she stay? Why did she still think she had to bear it all by herself? I crumpled the note in my fist. Anger toward Megan surged once more, but I forced myself to hold it back. Acting now, driven purely by rage, would only make things worse. And I knew from that moment there was no turning back for me. My parents woke up and asked about the noises from the night before, but I brushed it off. It was just the wind and rain, don't worry. They nodded without pressing further, though my mother's eyes were filled with concern as she looked at me. I sat there, gazing out at the backyard with its dripping trees, and realized that without a definitive solution, this cycle of violence and pain would continue. Hannah would go back, Megan would apologize, then beat her again, and she would endure it because she loved him. No, I couldn't allow that. It had to be uprooted completely. I recalled my financial knowledge and the debts of the Mitchell family that I had uncovered. That was the key. If I could control those debts, I could turn the tables without direct confrontation. A thrill ran through me. This was a risk, but worth taking. I would use the compensation money to buy up their debts and become an anonymous creditor. Smarter than fists, as I had thought. I began planning discreetly, using my professional experience and contacts to quietly acquire all of the Mitchell family's debts. First, I contacted Tom at the bank, keeping my voice calm. Tom, do you still remember the Mitchell file? I want to buy some of their loans. Can you introduce me to an intermediary? Tom didn't ask many questions. Sure, but are you certain? They owe a lot. I nodded over the phone, and he referred me to a company specializing in debt transfers. In the days that followed, I worked tirelessly, consulting clients during the day, sitting at my computer at night analyzing each loan. There were loans from local banks, from investment funds, even personal ones from old partners. I used intermediaries to conceal my identity, transferring money through anonymous accounts, and each loan was legally assigned. Every time I signed papers, my heart pounded as if I were playing a dangerous game of chess. What if they find out? I wondered, but pushed the thought aside. Absolute secrecy was essential. The process took several weeks, involving late-night calls and encrypted emails. I acquired the largest debt, $500,000, from the bank through a neutral lawyer, then the smaller ones totaling nearly $1.2 million. I had become their real creditor, but my identity remained completely hidden. Neither the Mitchell family nor anyone else knew. They still believed the debts were held by the original lenders, and I monitored the reports. They were delaying payments, interest piling on interest. I smiled coldly as I read the updates. They're struggling to manage. Now I held their financial life and death in my hands, and they had no idea. The thrill mixed with satisfaction. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. But I kept it secret, even from my parents. Just busy with work, I said when they asked why I was staying up late. Once everything was in place and the final debt transferred, I arranged to meet Hannah at a small cafe on the outskirts, a quiet spot with few passers-by. I need to see you. It's important. I texted, and she agreed, her voice weary over the phone. When she arrived, her exhaustion was evident, messy hair, dark circles under her eyes, forcing a stiff smile to appear normal. As soon as she sat down, I quickly noticed new bruises clumsily concealed under makeup and long sleeves. My heart ached as if stabbed. Bruises on her wrist, faint handprints on her cheek. Megan had struck again. I wanted to ask, to shout, but I didn't. I knew that questioning her now would be pointless and only make her withdraw. She would deny it, call it an accident, and we would argue. No, I had to be wise. I ordered coffee for both of us, took a deep breath to organize my thoughts, then looked her straight in the eyes. I spoke slowly, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. Hannah, I know you're enduring a lot. You don't have to pretend to be strong or okay in front of me. But this time, you need to hear me out completely. She froze, her hand stirring the coffee, stopping abruptly, her eyes lifting to meet mine with wariness. You're scaring me, she said softly. What are you going to say? I leaned forward, lowering my voice, choosing each word carefully. Divorce isn't an impulsive or emotional decision. It's a rational choice to protect yourself, both your safety and your long-term future. Hannah shook her head slightly, lips pressed together. "Here you go again," she said, her voice tinged with weariness. "You always see everything in the worst light." I replied, restraining myself from raising my voice. "I see things realistically. Most of the Mitchells' assets have long been mortgaged. The value you see is only surface level. Their company is buried in debt, revenue is declining, and cash flow is unstable. This isn't speculation. I've checked thoroughly." She looked down into her coffee as if the answer lay there. "Megan told me it's just a difficult phase," she said quietly. "He said everything will be fine soon." I continued, my voice dropping lower. "Fine is just how they're trying to maintain appearances. If you stay when everything collapses, you'll bear the heaviest consequences. No support, no safety, and nothing to protect you from what comes next." Tears began welling in her eyes. Hannah gripped her coffee cup tightly, knuckles turning white. The cafe buzzed around us, but between us was a heavy silence. After a very long moment, she finally spoke, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "This time, I believe you," she said. "After everything that's happened, I'm truly tired. I don't have the strength to keep lying to myself anymore." I was about to say more when Hannah took a deep breath, looked up at me, her eyes trembling. She said, her voice growing softer, "But Kevin, I'm pregnant. It's Megan's and my child. I don't want my baby to be born into a broken family." She wiped her tears, trying to keep her voice steady, but the fragility was clear in every word. "I know you're worried for me. I know you're right. But I still want to believe just this once that things can change. Maybe when faced with responsibility, he'll be different." I sat in silence, my throat tightening. Before me was no longer just numbers or arguments. It was my sister clinging to one last thread of hope to avoid complete collapse. And in that moment, I realized I no longer knew what to say to pull her away from that fragile belief. I understood that reason doesn't always triumph over emotion, and for the first time, I didn't know how to advise her correctly in this ironic situation. I wanted to shout, "No sis, he won't change." But seeing her slightly rounded belly under her clothes and her eyes filled with hope mixed with fear, I stayed silent. I hugged her and whispered, "I'm here. Whatever you decide, I'll support you." But inside, the storm raged again. The baby would complicate everything, and I had to act faster. I left the cafe with heavy steps, my mind spinning as if caught in a whirlwind. Hannah was pregnant. That news was like a ticking time bomb, shaking all my plans to their core. On the drive home, the chilly autumn wind whipped against my face. Golden leaves scattering underfoot, but everything around me blurred in my vision. I drove slowly, trying to reorganize my thoughts. The baby was my niece or nephew, part of our family's bloodline, but born into a situation where Megan was drowning in debt and violence. Hannah thought the child would change him, but I knew better. Men like Megan don't change because of a baby. They only use it as a weapon for control. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, blood rushing to my head, and asked myself, what do I do now? The debt acquisition plan was still underway, but now time had become more urgent than ever. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to monitor closely, ready to intervene when necessary. In the weeks that followed, life appeared normal on the surface, but inside I was like a ticking bomb. I continued my work, meeting clients and planning investments for the compensation money. But every evening when I returned home, I sat alone in the living room, scrolling through reports on the Mitchells. They were delaying payments, interest was accumulating, and I, the anonymous creditor, tracked every movement. My parents noticed the change in me. My mother asked, "What's wrong, Kevin? You look so tired." I forced a smile. "Just work, Mom, don't worry." But my concern for Hannah never eased. She called a few times, her voice weaker than before, talking about morning sickness and how Megan was trying harder. I swallowed hard, advised her to rest, but didn't dare probe deeper for fear she'd get angry again. "Take care of yourself, okay?" I always ended the calls that way, and she would laugh. "I know, Kevin." But I knew she was hiding things, new bruises, sleepless nights, and growing fear. Then one day, while working in the stuffy afternoon heat of my Ann Arbor office, My phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I was sitting in front of my computer screen analyzing financial charts for a major client when the ring interrupted my thoughts. I glanced at it, an unknown local number, and answered hesitantly, "Hello, Kevin Brown speaking." The voice on the other end was a professional female one, but urgent. "Mr. Brown? This is a nurse from the University of Michigan Hospital. We have a patient, Hannah Brown, in critical condition. Are you a family member? We need you to come immediately." My heart seemed to stop. My mind went blank for a few seconds. "Hannah? Critical?" I stammered. "Yes, I'm her brother. What happened? How is she?" The nurse replied briefly, "She's in emergency care. Please come right away." The call ended and the world around me faded. I stood up abruptly, hands shaking as I gathered my things, telling my boss I had to leave early. Family emergency. I'm going. Without waiting for a response, I rushed to my car, my heart pounding like war drums. It was raining, heavy drops pounding the windshield, and I sped straight to the hospital through the rain and blaring horns. The usual route now felt endlessly long. Puddles made the road slippery, but I floored the accelerator, passing other cars without care. Images of her from that previous rainy night flashed back, huddled, trembling. And now what? Lightning flashed across the gray sky and I honked frantically in traffic, tears streaming down my cheeks without me realizing. The hospital loomed ahead, its white building stark under the rain, and I parked haphazardly, running into the lobby soaked from head to toe. "Hannah Brown, where is my sister?" I demanded at the reception desk, my voice breaking with panic. They directed me. "She's in the emergency department." As soon as I arrived, I rushed into the ER area and saw Hannah being urgently treated by doctors behind closed doors. The beeping of machines echoed, nurses hurried in and out, and I stood outside, hands pressed against the glass wall, my heart feeling like it would burst. "Hang in there, sis, I'm here now," I whispered, though I knew she couldn't hear. Finally, when the door opened, a middle-aged doctor stepped out, mask pulled down, and looked at me. "You're Hannah Brown's brother?" I nodded, voice trembling. "Yes, that's me. How is she?" The doctor confirmed I was family and informed me, his tone professional but regretful. "She's out of immediate danger. We've stabilized her. But we couldn't save the pregnancy. We had to prioritize saving the mother. She suffered a severe fall with abdominal trauma, and we performed emergency surgery. The pain hit like a suffocating wave, a devastating blow to the chest. The baby, my niece or nephew, was gone." I stood there, eyes blurring with tears, hand over my mouth to stifle sobs. "How did this happen? How did she fall?" I stammered, but the doctor shook his head. "Signs of impact from a strong collision. You need to sign the paperwork. We have to complete the records." The pain was overwhelming, but I held myself together to sign the necessary documents, hands shaking on the papers. I realized no one from the Mitchell family had shown up. Not Megan, not Charles or Donna. They had abandoned her, as if Hannah were just a burden. Rage mixed with grief making me want to punch the wall, but I restrained myself. I had to stay strong for Hannah. In the days that followed, I stayed by her bedside, caring for my sister in every small way, never leaving her side. The hospital became a second home. I slept on waiting room chairs, brought food from home, wiped her face, and told light stories to soothe her. I called my parents to the hospital. When they entered the room and saw Hannah lying there with IV drips and heart monitors, they both froze in shock. My mother collapsed beside the bed, tears streaming uncontrollably. "My daughter. Why does she have to suffer like this?" she sobbed, her trembling hand touching Hannah's. I bent down, holding my mother's shoulders, and quietly but firmly said it was just an accidental fall, revealing nothing more. I knew some truths, if spoken now, would only cause everyone to collapse further. Hannah lay motionless, her face pale, lips bloodless and heartbreaking, as if she might vanish with the slightest touch. When Hannah regained consciousness, her eyes fluttered for a few seconds, dazed as she looked around, trying to piece together fragmented memories. Then suddenly she froze, A profound emptiness appeared in her gaze. Her hand slowly moved to her belly and stopped. In just a moment, she broke into panicked sobs. She cried out, voice shattering, "What happened to my baby, Kevin? Why don't I feel anything anymore?" She clutched her stomach tightly, tears pouring endlessly, her whole body shaking violently. I quickly pulled her into my arms, feeling how thin and light she had become, twisting my heart. "Calm down, Hannah," I repeated, my voice breaking. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. The doctors saved you." Hearing that, my parents froze. My mother paused mid-breath, and my father stood silent, as if grasping what no one needed to say aloud. Their eyes met in a moment of agony, then both moved to the bed. My mother held Hannah tightly, her trembling hands stroking her hair, tears falling silently. My father stood close, arms around both, his choked voice whispering broken words of comfort. No one asked anything more. The truth was too clear, and the loss was accepted in the silent embrace of family. She cried as if she had never cried before, as if all the suppressed pain from so long had finally exploded. I reached for the call button, nearly begging for the doctor. Only when they returned, administered a sedative, and spoke gently did Hannah's condition gradually stabilize. She lay quieter, eyes open but vacant, staring blankly at the white ceiling. No more tears, just a silent, terrifying void of loss. I sat by the bed, holding her hand tightly, saying nothing more. In that moment, I understood that some pains no words can soothe. Only presence and time might be enough to hold a person to this world. After a few days, her spirit settled somewhat. Hannah managed to eat a little soup, and I gently asked what happened. "Tell me what happened." She looked at me, tears falling again. "That day I argued with Megan. He got angry because I asked about the secretary. Then we struggled and I was pushed down the stairs. After that, I don't remember anything. That truth filled me with sorrow and hatred, like a knife twisting in my heart. Megan. He had killed their unborn child." I clenched my fists under the table, blood boiling, but stayed calm in front of her. "I'll take care of this," I whispered. From then on, Hannah's decline was evident despite our efforts to support her. She spoke little, ate irregularly, and cried silently at night. My parents took turns at the hospital. My mother told old stories to comfort her, but the pain of losing a child was too great. When she was discharged after a week on the way home, Hannah turned to me and said resolutely, "I want to divorce Megan. I'm never going back to that house." In her voice there was no lingering fragile hope, only clarity born from too much pain. I nodded, a mix of relief and sorrow rising in my chest. "I'll help you," I said slowly. "We'll get through this." I brought Hannah home, arranging a safe private room for her in our comfortable house where my parents could care for her daily. From then on, I began preparing seriously for her decision. Contacting a lawyer to start divorce proceedings, gathering necessary evidence of the abuse, and quietly arranging everything so that at the right moment I would reveal myself as the creditor. In the silence of late nights when everyone was asleep, I sat alone, looking out at the dark backyard, and understood that every boundary had been crossed far too much. From this moment, I would no longer protect my sister with mere advice. I would use everything, money, knowledge, and even my anger, to end this nightmare. Megan and his family would pay the price. The storm had arrived, and I was ready. 2 weeks after Hannah was discharged from the hospital, our lives revolved around recovery, not just physical but emotional. She stayed at home with our parents and me, in a cozy private room filled with books and potted flowers our mother had planted to comfort her. Hannah spoke less than before, her eyes often gazing distantly out the window, her hand unconsciously cradling her empty belly. I witnessed her crying silently every night, and it cut my heart like a knife. My parents worried endlessly. My mother cooked Hannah's childhood favorites, slow-simmered chicken soup, honey cookies, while my father sat telling old stories about the farm to soothe her. But the loss was too great. The unborn child, her last hope for a happy family, gone because of Megan's violence. I suppressed my rage, not revealing the full truth to my parents to spare them further pain, but every time I thought of him, my blood boiled. He hadn't just cheated and beaten her. He had indirectly killed my niece or nephew. I would not let him get away with it. I began preparing for the divorce proceedings, contacting a top lawyer in Ann Arbor, an old college friend who specialized in domestic violence cases. "Kevin, your sister's case is strong. Medical evidence, testimony, history. We'll win," he said confidently over the phone. I gathered everything. Hospital reports on the injuries, photos of bruises from that rainy night, even the infidelity messages Hannah had saved. Hannah hesitated at first, fearing public opinion, but after sleepless nights, she nodded. "I want to end it, Kevin. I can't take it anymore." We filed the papers, and thanks to the clear evidence, the divorce hearing was scheduled quickly just weeks later. I remember the day we received the notice. My heart pounded like war drums. This wasn't just a divorce. It was the first step in turning the tables. The day of the hearing arrived under a gray Ann Arbor sky heavy with clouds, as if foreshadowing a storm. The local courthouse, an old building with marble hallways and the musty smell of paperwork, was crowded, but only with a few relatives and lawyers. I drove Hannah there. She wore a simple black dress, hair tied back neatly, her face pale but resolute. I squeezed her hand tightly. "I'm here. You're so strong, Hannah. Just tell everything." We sat on the plaintiff's side next to our lawyer, and I glanced across the room. Megan and his parents, Charles and Donna, were there, dressed impeccably as if attending a party. He in a sleek black suit, his parents in expensive outfits with Donna's sparkling diamond necklace. But their attitude remained superior and cold, as if this were just a minor inconvenience. The hearing began with the judge's gavel, a stern, middle-aged woman with a grave voice. The Mitchells' lawyer, a bespectacled man with a shrill voice, stood first to defend them. They portrayed Hannah as the troublemaker, implying she was weak, overly sensitive, and exaggerating everything. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Megan Mitchell, has done his utmost in this marriage. But Mrs. Hannah Brown is impulsive and irritable over trivial matters. The allegations of violence are mere misunderstandings, and the divorce stems from her ingratitude and unworthiness for a prestigious family like the Mitchells." The sarcasm continued unabashedly, claiming she was ungrateful, unworthy of her in-laws, and that the divorce was the result of her impulsiveness. Donna whispered loudly to Charles, audible to us, "That girl was never a good match from the start, so rustic, always making a fuss." Megan sat there, a sneer curling his lips, his eyes sweeping over Hannah with contempt, as if she were beneath him. My blood boiled, my body tensed like a coiled spring. I wanted to stand and shout that they were the frauds, drowning in debt, but I held back. I sat beside her, softly reassuring Hannah. "Take deep breaths. Don't listen to them. Soon you'll tell your side. The truth will prevail." She nodded, gripping my hand tightly, eyes brimming with tears but not falling. The hearing continued with testimony from our side. Our lawyer presented the evidence, medical reports, injury photos, and then it was Hannah's turn. For the first time, Hannah stood tall in court, her voice trembling at first but growing steady. She recounted everything. The betrayal upon discovering the affair with his secretary, the escalating violence from slaps to beatings, the threats of divorce if she resisted, and the price she paid. Being pushed down the stairs in a struggle, losing her unborn child. "I had hoped the baby would change him, but he pushed me," she choked, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't stop. The courtroom fell silent as the story unfolded. The Mitchells' defenses grew disjointed and weak. Their lawyer tried to interject. "It was just an accident, Your Honor." But the judge shook her head, eyes stern. I watched Megan. He sat rigid, but his face paled, the sneer gone from his lips. Charles and Donna whispered frantically, faces flushed, but dared not interrupt. The gallery, a few reporters and relatives murmured, sympathetic eyes turning to Hannah. The hearing concluded with the divorce granted swiftly based on clear evidence of abuse. Hannah requested no assets. "I don't want anything tied to them anymore," she had whispered to me earlier. The judge struck the gavel. Divorce approved. No asset division as requested by the plaintiff. Hannah exhaled in relief, shoulders trembling, and I hugged her tightly. It's over, sis. You're finally free. But it wasn't over yet. As soon as the ruling was announced, I stood to speak further, my voice calm but resolute like a delayed bomb. The judge nodded. Mr. Brown, do you have something to add? I presented a thick folder, hands steady, looking straight into Megan's and his parents' eyes. Your Honor, I am Kevin Brown, brother of Mrs. Hannah, but today I speak as the legal creditor of all outstanding loans in the Mitchell family's name. All transfers have been completed legally through intermediaries. The courtroom fell dead silent, then erupted in murmurs. Before the court and those present, I disclosed the debt details, totaling $1.2 million, including bank loans, investment funds, and personal ones. I demand the opposing party repay in full on schedule, or I will pursue necessary legal actions, foreclosure, asset liquidation. I listed each one, my voice echoing. The $500,000 from Ann Arbor Bank secured by the mansion, the $300,000 from former partners secured by vehicles and company shares. The room buzzed. Megan's parents froze, faces ashen as they realized everything had spiraled beyond control. Megan stood stunned, his arrogance crumbling completely. He stammered in protest, "Impossible! Who are you to do this?" Then fell silent, realizing there was no escape as their glossy facade was stripped bare in public. He glared at me with fear and hatred, but I met his gaze coldly, recalling every humiliation from the wedding to now. The judge struck the gavel for order. This matter is outside the divorce proceedings, but the documents are valid, parties to resolve privately. I took Hannah's hand and led her out of the courtroom, leaving behind bewildered and chaotic stares. Hannah whispered, "How did you do it?" I smiled sadly. "I've been preparing for a long time, sis. It's over now." We stepped outside. The rain had stopped, the sky clearing with sunlight like a new beginning. Afterward, the media covered the story extensively, exposing the Mitchells' debts and downfall. Local Ann Arbor papers ran headlines. Prominent businessman crumbles after divorce, buried in debt, creditor revealed as bride's brother. Reporters dug deeper, interviewing former partners, and everything unraveled. Rolling loans, delayed payments, fake glamour. To repay the debts, they were forced to liquidate all valuable assets. The luxurious mansion sold hastily at a discount, luxury cars auctioned, company shares transferred, and status symbols like expensive watches and artwork gone. I monitored through my lawyer, demanding timely repayment, and they complied with no escape. From being celebrated, they fell into hardship, scraping by in a small rented apartment, facing scorn and ridicule from those who once flattered them. "Look at the Mitchells now, practically beggars," I overheard from friends. Their past arrogance was fully exposed, from humiliating my parents at the wedding to the violence against Hannah. They lost all friends, partners turned away, and Megan, he was now unemployed, job hunting for menial work, his once smug face gaunt and broken. After all those tumultuous events, my family gradually returned to a peaceful rhythm of life, free from the noise and pressure of the past. The comfortable house in the suburbs of Ann Arbor became a true sanctuary, with its lush backyard and gentle morning sunlight filtering through the curtains. No more emergency calls in the middle of the night. No more worrying about where Hannah was or what she was enduring. We began living more slowly, savoring the small things. My father sitting and reading on the porch, my mother cooking in the modern kitchen, and Hannah, she started smiling more often, though they were still soft, tentative smiles. I returned to my work as a financial advisor, but now with a lighter mind, no longer staying up nights plotting retribution. Life flowed like a calm river after a flood, carrying away painful memories while washing away all the grime. I took Hannah to regular therapy sessions with a middle-aged female psychologist in downtown Ann Arbor, whose office was cozy, filled with green plants and soft sofas. At first, Hannah was withdrawn and guarded, curling up in the chair, clutching tissues tightly, answering questions only briefly. "I don't want to talk about it anymore," she whispered in the initial session, eyes fixed on the floor, tears streaming down. The therapist was patient, and I waited outside, my heart tightening each time I saw her emerge looking exhausted. The early sessions were difficult. Hannah spoke of losing the baby, the bruises, the shattered hopes, and each time she cried until she was drained. I drove her home in silence, only squeezing her hand tightly at red lights. "You did great," I would say, and she would nod weakly. But over time, those rare smiles began appearing more frequently. After a few months, Hannah gradually opened up more in therapy. She started recounting childhood memories with a lighter voice, occasionally even giggling at old silly stories. Each time she returned home, her eyes were brighter, no longer shadowed by that weary gloom. One afternoon, she looked at me and said softly, "Today I feel so much lighter, Kevin." I hugged her tightly, clearly sensing hope returning. Slowly, but steadily. Living in a safe space with family by her side helped Hannah regain stability step by step. She no longer panicked at mentions of the past. The house became a fortress. No more threatening calls from Megan, who was now barred from contact by court order. No more fears about financial uncertainty. Hannah began engaging in small activities, helping our mother cook, reading with our father, even walking in the park with me on weekends. At first, if someone inadvertently mentioned the wedding or Megan, she would stiffen, eyes welling up. But gradually, she could talk about it without crying. That's the past now. I've learned a lot. I witnessed that transformation from a shattered girl to a stronger woman, even if the scars remained. My parents played their part too. My mother hugging her every morning, my father telling awkward jokes to make her laugh. "As long as our daughter is at peace now, that's all that matters," my father said one evening, and Hannah smiled, a genuine smile. My parents felt more at ease seeing their daughter living with the family, cared for and protected, no longer facing her pain alone. Before, they had worried about her being far away, enduring everything by herself, but now, seeing her eat better and sleep more soundly, they breathed sighs of relief. They didn't know all the details of my plan, only that I had helped Hannah divorce, and I kept it secret to spare them further worry. But that reassurance spread, making the house warmer, no longer heavy with the atmosphere that lingered after the trial. Every evening, the family gathered around the dinner table again. Every day, simple conversations gradually replaced the former heavy silences. Meals were no longer just a formality. My mother cooked familiar fish soup. My father recounted old farm days. Hannah excitedly chimed in with fun stories from her new part-time job at a bookstore, and I laughed along, adding tales of quirky clients. Laughter and voices filled the air warmly, quietly mending the remaining cracks in our home. In those moments, I realized the greatest value lies not in money or victory, but in the sense of safety and mutual respect. The compensation money, now growing steadily through safe investments, was merely a tool, not the goal. Sitting there watching my family gathered together, I reflected on the long journey. From the humiliating wedding to the trial of justice, from the pain of loss to the peace of the present. Money can buy a house or pay off debts, but it cannot buy Hannah's smile or the reassured look in my parents' eyes. That comes from respect for each other's origins, for each other's pain, and for the right to happiness. I learned that winning or losing is temporary, family is eternal. Looking back on the path we had traveled, I understood that not every sacrifice is worth cherishing if it is built on fear and unconditional endurance. My parents sacrificed for the wedding, borrowing money to cover the costs, but in return received humiliation and suffering. Hannah sacrificed for love, enduring violence in hopes of changing Megan, but the result was losing her child and nearly her life. I remembered those sleepless nights planning to acquire the debts, and realized that sacrifice is only beautiful when it is voluntary and met with respect, not fear or coercion. Blind sacrifices only nurture evil and prolong pain. Reflecting on everything that had passed, I drew one clear lesson. Family only truly means something when relationships are built on respect, not power or background. The Mitchells once used money and status to belittle us, but in the end, they collapsed precisely because they lacked the most basic thing: respect for others. My family was different. From hard-working farmers to a financial advisor like me, we stood firm because we knew how to listen to each other, to be there when needed, and not to judge based on appearances or status. Background never defines a person. Love and respect are the true foundation. I told Hannah this during our late-night talks. She deserved respect, not a life of endurance. I also learned another bitter lesson. Silence in the face of injustice is not always noble patience. Sometimes that very silence allows evil to persist. I had stayed silent at the wedding to avoid ruining my sister's big day. But that silence only emboldened their contempt. If I had spoken up sooner, perhaps Hannah wouldn't have suffered so long. Silence in many cases is a form of complicity, a costly lesson I had to acknowledge. I promised myself that from now on I would never turn a blind eye to injustice, no matter how small. And the final thing I kept for myself and for Hannah is to have the courage to set boundaries and walk away when a relationship only brings harm. Choosing peace is not selfish. It is a responsibility to oneself. In that moment, I knew she would be stronger. Our story ends here, but those lessons will stay with me for the rest of my life.